ELAC meeting. We are going to be working on the annual ELAC DCYF Joint Recommendation Report for FSKA. And before we get started, we're just going to take a moment to do introductions. So I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and do chat introductions. We have a lot to get through today. So in the chat box, please share your name, your role, and your favorite way to spend a sunny weekend in Washington. I'll give everybody a minute. Oh, and if there's anybody who's not able to type and it's easier for you to just come off mute and introduce, do so as well. Oh my gosh, Alexandra, that sounds so nice. Reading in a hammock on a sunny day. That might be my favorite thing to do ever. Thanks so much, everybody. I love reading these. Now that we actually have some sunny weekends to enjoy, we've earned it. All right. So I want to go ahead and jump in. Everybody who hasn't introduced themselves in the chat, please feel free to do so. Following up on the conversation we had during our last report development session, the feedback we received on the updates that we were providing is that it would be more helpful for you guys to have kind of an overview, higher level document to review to get an idea of where we're at with the recommendations we made last year. So we did send out that doc. Oh, and I think Jessica just put a link to it in the chat if you don't have it pulled up on your end. And that is the FSKA status snapshot. So again, this is relaying a lot of the same information we were trying to capture in that more detailed tracker, but it's just a little higher level. Hopefully that meets your needs as we start gathering your feedback for the 2024 recommendations. We also included a proviso update doc with the prep email. If we have a link for that, Jessica will throw it in. Oh, there it is. So there's a link for that in the chat as well. So that also kind of gives you a snapshot update of where we're at as far as legislative. And so we just want to give you guys a few minutes with these docs to review. And also, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute and share. But in the meantime, we're just going to give everybody a couple minutes to review those two documents. All right, Senator Wilson has a call out that SB 6038 should be included on this. Thanks for calling that out. I can dig up some info to drop in the chat, unless Senator Wilson or Melissa has anything to share on that.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones that you may have missed because it did not go through early learning K-12. Because it went right to Ways and Means, but it's a waiver for Working Connections childcare. Currently, the business and the B&O waiver goes only up to age 8. And so this legislation now waives the B&O exemption all the way up to age 13 and then up to age 18 if individuals are either involved in, there's some categories there, but young people in the justice system or in child welfare or in with special needs also were included in that. And I see Melissa's got her hand up, but has details. But I just wanted to make sure in that also was the licensing exemption, and it did not pass, but I'm not giving up on that one. That one was not funded through Ways and Means, but we'll continue to work on the permanent licensing waiver. But just wanted to make sure from a business aspect, individuals knew that also was signed off by the governor. Thanks. Help me out, Melissa.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. I really appreciate that. This document is specifically an update on implementation DCYF is engaged in.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank
okay,
you.
Perfect.
Okay,
and
okay, that helps me out. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, and then it's coming. It's coming.
I've made a note of it. I've made a note of it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I had one more update that I got this morning on 6109. Oh, no, specifically the fingerprinting. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get those two confused. I don't know why. Anyway, they're looking at developing a position description for the person doing the fingerprinting. And then the sites that have been listed in the document are being vetted with the vendors currently. Say that 5 times fast.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you, Senator Wilson. Does anybody else have any questions or call outs on the documents? We're requesting that you guys keep those open so that they can help guide you when you're providing feedback. But if you have any questions or anything you wanted to add, please feel free to share. All right, so we're running a few minutes early. I don't think Nicole's here yet. I see Ruben, but we are going to have a presentation from them, a legislative update on the decision package concepts. So they're going to be kind of walking us through more of that in detail in preparation for you guys going to the Jamboard and getting started on the recommendations. So we'll wait until I think Nicole said that she would be trying to hop on around 9:15. So she might be on in a few minutes.
Yeah, let's wait for Nicole. While we wait for just a quick question for Senator Wilson, you talked about the licensing exempt waiver did not pass. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, what that was?
Yeah, just for the last 2 sessions, I've been trying to waive licensing fees for childcare providers.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought.
It has not happened. And so it is just a fiscal issue, not about not licensing, just about waiving and trying to think about how we continue to support the business side of what is not a business model. And until we get that figured out, I'm always trying to figure out what other ways we can provide some release valves, if you will, and some support to providers. So that's what that was about, Ruben. And we can, yeah, that's all it was. Little bit big.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. We were, as you can imagine, we were hoping that would have passed this year. I know it didn't get momentum last year, and I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully, it'll come up next time, Senator Wilson. I really hope that passes someday.
Yeah, no, it's the beginning of a new biennium, and we also need voice always. It's always important too. So critically important. So I appreciate the support.
Lois, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Senator Wilson and Ruben, this might be a question for you as well. Isn't the federal government proposing sending more block grant funds to the states? And if I'm correct on that, is that any way that money could be used to help defray the cost of licensing fees?
Good morning, Lois. I am not 100% sure, but let's table that question for when Nicole jumps on.
All right, sounds good. So Ruben, I'm counting on you to remember to share that question.
Yep, I will.
Thank you.
And as everybody's reviewing the documents, is there anything that's not included on there? Any topic that you are hoping to get some information on that will help inform your recommendations? Or do you have any clarifying questions? We have Melissa from the Government Affairs team here, and of course, other people on the call that can speak to that. But if there's anything you want clarified, or you want to add, please let us know. Oh, go ahead, Astrid.
Morning, everyone. Astrid Newell with the Washington State Department of Health ELAC member. I know in previous conversations, we had talked about opportunities to link our recommendations and the report moving forward to the early learning coordination plan, which many of the folks on the call were part of, including Senator Wilson, and just wanting to make sure that that we're thinking more kind of more broadly as we're thinking about recommendations. And so I'm not sure what happened with that recommendation, or if that is still a possibility of making some links to that work. Thanks.
Thanks, Astrid. Yeah, we did share that document during our last report development session. It seemed like there was some interest in kind of using that to broaden the recommendations. So here, I can pull the link from that document that we had last time, if that would be helpful as a reference point. And it's also a good reminder that the way that we've kind of been organizing things on our end reflects the broad categories that you guys divided your recommendations into last year, just kind of as a starting point. But we don't need to stick with those exact categories. We can change them, we can add more, we can take some away. So however you guys want to organize it, we can do that. Let me see. And I'm going to pull that document, Astrid, so that I can use it as a reference.
And it was maybe less about that particular document, but really thinking about how to align with the work that was meant, that the early learning coordination plan was really meant to coordinate all of us around moving forward on early learning and related things. So like, how do we build on that and use that moving forward? That's all.
Thanks, Astrid. I dropped the website link in the chat, and we'll also grab that reference doc just in case it's helpful as you guys are in the Jamboard a little bit later. All right, well, I grabbed that. Does anybody else have any questions? Or anything that they would like to have as a reference when you start providing feedback after our presentation? If there's any documents you need or any information you need, let us know and we can grab that. Oh, go ahead, Enrica.
Oh, thank you, Erin. Just a quick question. I was just wondering if I'm noticing the inclusion mentorship program indicated as new. I was just wondering if there was any more information about that on the proviso document.
Melissa, do you have any additional information on that?
Don't, but I will work with the program lead to see if I can't get more information in the interim, and hopefully, I know that the next June meeting is canceled, but I can follow up with any more information specifically related. I do know that, let me just open up the document really quick. I have it in front of me, but I also have a million documents in front of me. Let me see, let's go there. I know that there was, let me see. And this is the inclusive mentorship program. So just looking at the notes here, yeah, I'm just waiting to hear more back on the contracting process and where we're at on that. Really, is that we're just beginning the contracting processes for this, and wanting to align also with the legislative intent. So more to come for sure.
Okay, thank you. It'd be great to get some additional information about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Erin, I know Nicole's just wrapping up another meeting. I just texted her. I'm wondering we can bring up the slide deck and I can actually talk about the two slides on licensing and request for 2025. Then we can kind of go back to the beginning when Nicole writes. Is that okay? Sorry to jump around.
Yeah, that works. Thanks, Ruben.
Morning.
Oh, never mind. Great
Hi,
time.
Nicole. Good morning. Perfect timing.
Sorry about that.
So,
Jumping right in.
Yeah. Hey, Nicole, real quick. Lois had asked a question. Senator Wilson was talking about the licensing fee fees being waived, and the last kind of 2 years how it didn't go through, and hopefully in the future it will. Lois had a question about any possible federal box grants that come out that could maybe help with the licensing fees. Lois, do you want to ask that question again real quick so make sure I get it right?
Sure. Thank you, Ruben. Good morning, Nicole. I had asked, I know the federal government was looking at increasing the amount of Child Care Development Fund block grants to the state. So I'm wondering if it's possible for any of those funds to be redirected to help pay for our yearly fees. Is that something that the legislature can put into action?
Thanks for the question, Lois. And I see Senator Wilson as well. And so I'll answer from amount of funds available, and then Senator Wilson, maybe if I can lean on you a little bit around what the legislature may or may not do there. One of the things I just want to acknowledge is that Ruben and I have also had some discussion about how we can try and ease payment of those licensing fees for providers as well, instead of having to write checks or things like that. The feds did give states, appropriate states more funding for the Child Care Development Fund. However, it was about $10 to $11 million for Washington State, and that $10 to $11 million actually does not even cover the new requirements that came out related to enrollment-based pay, prospective payment, doing grants, etc. And so we're going to need to ask for more funds to even implement those CCDF requirements, and we'll need to ask that of the legislature, and then the legislature would need to make a decision about whether or not they were going to continue to waive those fees or direct us to use some of those funds to pay for those fees is my understanding, but don't want to speak for Senator Wilson or any thoughts she has on that. Just want to clarify the amount of funds that we received don't cover the new actual CCDF requirements.
Hi, Nicole. And Lois, I'm going to just say that I know very little about the actual dollars and such. The work that I've been doing just was from my own knowledge around what we're trying to do to relieve some of this pain, if you will, and the lack of a business model for providers. So legislatively, what would need to happen is either something might come through like as a DP, a decision package, or as a budget proviso request from the agency. That's one way something might happen, and that depends, I think, on the rules or the strings that may be tied to dollars that come in. And then the other way would be is if someone like myself as a legislator continues to say, this is one thing that we can do in our own state to do this, and would continue to have it come as a piece of legislation to change the statute. And the difference is, and I think the reason this was a little weird was because it did not go through early learning K-12. It went directly to Ways and Means because it's a tax issue. It's not in our state considered an early learning programming issue because it's around taxes. And so that's why I think people didn't really have their eyes on it. And the first time it went through, to be really honest, people's eyes were on TK, and they didn't really spend any attention on those two levers I was trying to help them out with, and that's the licensing payment and also this issue of a tax burden. So I did the same thing this time around. So the DP will come, the decisions will come, and then based on whatever does or doesn't come out of DCYF, I'll continue to do my work, and we can talk about it. You won't see anything early. You won't see anything that says the money's here now, let's do something, because I don't have the ability to do that as a legislator, nor do we as a legislature until we come back into session, unless there's some kind of an emergency or something. So we would be working on this, and it would happen next session, if that makes sense. But would love to continue the conversation. Know that it's top of mind. And if it doesn't come from DCWF, it'll come from somewhere else, like the 30th District Office, just saying. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you,
When
Senator
I say,
Wilson.
what do I mean
also
when there's a
thinking-
lack of a business model for childcare? Childcare, Susan, was never built on a business model. It was built on a system because we knew it was incredibly important to care for children. And for years, we have done this. We, being providers and individuals and communities, have been doing this because it's important. And we know the nurturing and care of kids is one of the most important things we can do. It's never been funded as a business. It's not like widgets, it isn't about you didn't make enough. So therefore, so that's what I mean. It's not that there hasn't been a want. Fair Start for Kids was really the first time we looked at not only services, supports, and resources for families and children, but we also started looking at the business side about what it would take to sustain and maintain the profession and the business of childcare and early learning.
Oh, thank you for that, Senator Wilson, because I was thinking I was interpreting it as like I've been running a childcare business successfully for 35 years.
No, you have, but have you not struggled every one of those years?
Oh, absolutely. So you're
Okay.
referencing the system is not.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not referencing individual businesses, and that's what I need to clarity on, because I was trying not to take offense, but I kind of
Oh,
was.
please. Oh. Please, Susan, not at all. This is
Okay.
around the institutions we've created to not support
I would
people doing the
100% agree
work.
with that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay,
So Senator Wilson, before we go, thank you for that. I just also want to point out that since we are looking at the biennium budget, that might also be another way to use, the capital gains revenue as well. So just throwing that out there. You don't have to answer that, just something to think about.
right, and know that, cap gains, you're right, is what's funding it, and so we have to make sure we maintain funding. That's something, yeah, it's an important thing to keep our eye on.
And I'm gonna have Ruben weigh in here, and thank Senator Wilson and Lois and others, just about process, because I also heard DPs and I'm sort of hearing the ask in there, but Ruben, I'm gonna let you weigh in.
Yeah, and Senator Wilson, again, appreciate you bringing this up because they're not easy to process, guys. It's on your end and our end, right? So it unfortunately will not be included as a DP for 2025. 2 years ago, Senator Wilson, this, we did do that. It was not included in the governor's budget. He took it out, or the governor's office took it out. So it would need to come from elsewhere, but doesn't mean we won't try in the future, right? If it doesn't pass, we'll continue. Okay, which is a good segue, right? So Nicole and I would like to go over our 25-27 early learning draft decision package concepts. We presented this to Secretary Hunter and the rest of the DCYF leadership team a couple of weeks ago, and we just want to provide that information to you guys this morning and on those concepts. So I'll let Nicole start, and she'll run through the early learning concepts, and then I got a couple slides towards the end regarding my ask for licensing. So go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. And one of the things that I think we really want to talk about and share today is the timeline and process. And then really, we've looked at some of these recommendations in the Fair Start for Kids Act and the Temporary Licensing Subcommittee, and see the majority of the asks as connected to things that you all have brought up in either ELAC or provider supports. And so while we can't always ask for everything that you all are asking us to implement, we are really trying to listen and hear and go back to some of those recommendations and reports as we think about really setting the foundation for the system that goes all the way from licensing to subsidy and beyond. And so that's some of what we'll talk about today. One of the things that I will say is, as you look at these concepts, they're kind of chunked out today for us to talk about each of those separately. How these end up getting submitted in the final form, I think, is still up for discussion. Because again, really wanting to make sure that we're putting together all of the pieces related to early learning, from subsidy to licensing and more. So if we want to go to the next slide. This is just the timeline for proposed decision package and agency request legislation. And so we are, my goodness, we are in April. It is April, or I'm sorry, we're in May. We're past April. We're in May. It's May 14th. And so we have gone through, as Ruben said, that initial discussion at leadership table, and the ideas that we're presenting to you today, we believe to be mostly final in moving forward. So what this means is that our team is working with our budget folks around the costs associated with this, to continue to refine them and have these ideally finalized by the end of August for submittal to the Office of Financial Management in September, where that gets reviewed and then the governor's budget comes out and we see what was actually put in the governor's budget from the agency request. So if we want to go to the next slide. When we think about our outcomes, all of these are tied back to 80% kindergarten readiness, making sure that we have high quality early learning available and affordable to all in Washington. And as we look at that availability and affordability, we know that our subsidy base rates are really important in supporting providers to provide that care. And then always wanting to keep our racial equity and social justice goals in front of mind. And the other thing I'll just note as we think about our strategic outcomes is that our early learning outcomes are also really tied to our prevention strategies at the agency when we think about reduction in child abuse and neglect and preventing children from going into out-of-home placement. So keeping all of those strategic outcomes in mind as we think about our decision packages. So if we want to go to the next slide, this is just some of the why, and hopefully this looks somewhat familiar to you. We know that childcare is essential. We know we want to continue to increase dosage, meaning the length of day and the amount of time that children are in our ECAP, which is our state fed and pre-K, and want to continue to reach entitlement to support kindergarten readiness. When we think about stabilizing the industry and supporting child outcomes, we also know that we need to increase the number of families that are eligible for subsidy, as well as continue to make that movement on our rates from rates based on the market to the cost of quality care. And we're hoping that that really can help us expand participation and subsidy, as well as work towards that goal of a living wage for a workforce that is disproportionately women of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. I spoke a little bit before about the CCDF rules. And so these are all policies that the department really supports when we think about enrollment-based pay, prospective payment, and there's a cost associated with these. And so we want to make sure that we're making the ask around that. And then transitioning child welfare, childcare to working connections childcare. And then Ruben is also going to talk about the why around some of the work in licensing. So if we want to go to the next slide. This is just a reminder of what was in the Fair Start for Kids Act, because there are certain things that we really need to ask for because they're in law. And again, these are all really great things that help move our early learning system forward. I'm going to start on the right-hand side of this. And what you see is that July 1, 2025, we continue to increase eligibility for subsidy, moving from 60% state median income up to 75% state median income. And that will be in our ask this year. I do just want to note that in July 1 of 2027, there is an increase in eligibility for working connections slated as well to go up to 85% of the state median income. The left-hand side of this is also really important. You know, when we talk about increasing eligibility and increasing base rates, we do have in the Fair Start for Kids Act that childcare subsidy base rates have to be at the 85th percentile of the market for licensed or certified childcare providers. But this also asked us to contemplate moving towards a cost of quality care model, of which we worked with the early educator design team and really built off of the work that came out of the Child Care Collaborative Task Force. So these are some guiding laws that we're taking a look at as we work on our decision packages. So if we want to go to the next slide. The other thing that we've been talking with this group and provider supports about is our access and living wage proviso. And we really see the cost of quality care rate model, the working connections eligibility expansion, and ECAP entitlement as foundation to that access and living wage proviso work, which we're doing right now. It's building on all of the things that we've been doing, but that report isn't due until after this next legislative session. So we really want to focus on these three, what we see as foundational pieces, again, to continue to stabilize and move the system forward. So if we want to go to the next slide. This is highlighting all of the concepts we're going to talk about today. I said before, we keep calling them decision packages. We may end up doing some agency request legislation. We just really want to talk with you about the concepts today. And let you know, again, sort of what is in law, because when it's in law, there are things that we must ask for. So this is all of them. The one I hadn't yet talked about is the child care complaint unit. And so Ruben's going to address that when we get through this. But if we want to go to, and the asterisk means it was connected. We felt it was connected to a Fair Start for Kids Act report or a temporary licensing subcommittee recommendation. Again, really trying to sort of draw our ask back to things that you're sharing with us and asking for us to implement. So if we want to go to the next slide. So the first one I'm going to talk a little bit about is Working Connections Childcare, and this is the eligibility expansion to 75% state median income. And so for a family of 3, that goes up to about $6,300 per month, or about $75,000 per year. We estimate that about 9,500 families would take us up on accessing subsidy once we increase to 75% state median income. So that means we could potentially serve an additional 16,000 children. When we increase the original eligibility tier for Working Connections, we do have to establish a second tier eligibility. And you might be like, what does that mean? So what that means is once a family goes through their 12-month certification period, when they come back through and reapply, this means that we have to establish a copay tier for those that may be in the 75 to 85% state median income bracket at reapplication. So that means we need to have a copay that's probably about $350 per month. You see below the second tier eligibility requirement, this is required under our Child Care Development Fund. And really what it helps make sure that we're doing is not creating a benefit cliff. This is something that already exists right now. And second tier eligibility right now goes to 65% SMI with a $215 copayment. So just as we increase eligibility, we need to make sure we're meeting all of those CCDF requirements as well. So if we go to the following slide. The next two concepts are ECAP entitlement. So ECAP entitlement means that in 2026-27, we want to serve every family who chooses to participate that is eligible. And we would add approximately 4,400 slots to reach entitlement. Funding in this is really focused on conversion from part day slots to school day slots, and to fund our working day slots. We also want to make sure we continue to look at sustainable slot rates and quality supports and provider scholarships. And so ECAP did get a rate increase this year, but we are still not at what the ECAP cost model says. And so we know we need to continue to look at that ECAP rate. And quality supports really are the things that help support our child outcomes, like our purchasing of creative curriculum, teaching strategy gold, and then technical assistance for providers. You're going to see that rates and making sure that rates are adequate is a theme. So as we look at that in ECAP, we also know we need to do that in Working Connections. And so as I shared, the early educator design team came together to make recommendations on the cost model used to develop rates. And the big drivers as we look at that cost model really are personnel, but there were some non-personnel costs and quality enhancements that we looked at as well. And a quality enhancement were things like making sure that teachers had time to plan, that there were floaters available, that they could engage in parent-teacher conferences and family engagement. So right now, as of April 2024, approximately 1,600 licensed centers and 2,400 licensed family homes. If the cost of quality care rate enhancement moved, or excuse me, base rates moved forward, it would be about 1,600 licensed centers and 24 licensed family homes who would get rate increases because they're serving children on subsidy, which means that they're serving approximately 30,000 families and 51,000 children. As the number of families and providers continues to increase, we would see increases there as subsidy eligibility expands. So, Deanne, that your question about when we increase eligibility for families, part of what we have to do is there has to be a second tier eligibility to help with the benefit cliff. And so when we add that second tier eligibility, there is a new copay tier.
The reason I'm bringing this up, Nicole, is because I think it's just important to understand that that's going to happen if we end up expanding even further, that it's not going to stay flat. I just think it helps us all to know, okay, it's going to go up commensurate with that the percentage of income that they'll be using.
Yeah.
And I just think that getting that into our conversation as early learning folks is a helpful thing. I'm just thinking about, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But I don't want it to be a surprise as we maybe expand in the future. We might add another tier and another tier.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair point, and thank you for saying that. And I think the key also, and part of what you said, Deanne, is that what we see is that even as we look at those tiers, it's going to be that families pay no more than 7%. The Fair Start for Kids Act really set the copays so that families were paying no more than 7%. That's a something that really also, I think, came out in the new CCDF rules. And it's also something that the Access and Living Wage Proviso asks us to look at. So yes, there will be some increased tiers, but they would be no more than 7%. And that's great messaging for us to make sure that folks know that there's not this sort of cap forever on copays, that there has to be some movement as eligibility increases. Thank you for that. Okay, so if we want to go to the next slide, these are the last two, and then I'm going to turn this over to Ruben. So the next two on here are the Child Care Development Federal Fund, and we're calling it compliance, or we could call it Child Care Development Fund, bringing payment closer to the private market. There's lots of different ways we could think about how we frame this. But this, again, like I said, are things that DCYF is really excited to get behind and want to make sure we're asking for the appropriate funding to do this. And this is enrollment-based pay, prospective provider subsidy payment. Many of you may remember we did do enrollment-based pay during COVID, at the beginning of COVID. And so it's something that we know that it costs us about 7% on top of the subsidy per cap to do this. So we're working through costing the other pieces related to prospective provider subsidy payment, looking and continuing to get guidance from the Administration for Children and Families on how we do grants and contracts in underserved areas. And then we have a 12-month eligibility piece that we need to take a look at. And so one is making sure that when children are added during the eligibility period, that we actually extend the entire household's eligibility for 12 months once that child is added. So let's say a child came in, you have a family, you were 6 months through your eligibility period, and there was a new child added to the household. Typically, we would just say, oh, you get 6 months of childcare. But now what we're going to be able to do is say, when that new child comes in, the household is determined eligible, we'll extend that period for actually a full 12 months. So again, another good policy when we think about continuity of care for children and families and continuity of payment for providers. And then the last thing that we have on here, and we've talked about this one a few different times over the years, is, we still do have child welfare, child care, and working connections child care at DCYF. And we really want to think about how we can merge those child care subsidy programs together in really thinking about how we're providing continuity of care for our children who are potentially an out-of-home placement, and to really support those families through permanency, adoption, etc. Right now, sometimes what can happen is that having access to care can delay permanency. And so we want to look at sort of what is the right certification period here for a family and how can we bring those things together. Again, this is something we hear from providers often who are providing both working connections and child welfare childcare. There's a difference in how they're getting authorized right now. In working connections, you get authorized for 12 months. In child welfare childcare, you get authorized a month at a time. And so we know we've got some opportunity here to make the system a bit better. I'm going to turn this over to Ruben to talk a bit about the complaint unit. And as I said, we're really committed to thinking about what is the best package to move all of this early learning work forward to support providers and to implement things we've heard from you. So Ruben.
Thanks, Nicole. And again, Ruben Reyes, I'm the Assistant Secretary for Licensing Division. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of what Licensing Division oversees within DCYF, inside of DCYF. So, you know, we license and monitor also, you know, foster care, foster parents. We have like 4,300 foster parents, and we also license and monitor group care facilities who provide services for homeless youth or in DDA and foster children. And then we also license and monitor, which is kind of brand new to us. It's called residential private schools. So it's kind of the boarding schools that we have across the state. We don't like to call them boarding schools, but like the Annie Wrights in Tacoma. So we just offer a array of kind of services regarding licensing inside the licensing division. And you go to the next slide, please. This is the only DP that I moved forward in a licensing division. Okay, we have close to 5,900 licensed childcare providers, to be at 5,870 today. It has shown an increase in the last 2 years, which is great, right? And this is obviously school age and family homes and centers. I have 85. I have my FT allotment for licensors is 85. Okay, so if the trend continues, we're going to be over 6,000 licensed childcare providers. I'm not sure when the last time we were over 6,000. In order to provide, and this is kind of the why, in order to provide quality technical assistance to our childcare providers, we need to have smaller caseloads. We need to specialize in our work. Like I said, 85 licensors I currently have today with about a 10% vacancy rate. So we have about 7 or 8 vacancies on any given day, which leads about, 80 licensors with close to about 75 to 80 on their caseload. And hearing from ELAC, hearing from provider support, hearing from WCCA, we need to do a better job in really providing good quality technical assistance to our childcare community. And so what I move forward is ask for 16 FTEs to form a compliance complaint unit. For the last 2 years, guys, we've had a 68% increase in intakes of complaints in childcare providers. So I want to specialize that. I don't know how we're gonna do it. This is just kind of the what, trying to get to FTEs, and I'm gonna come to you, and I'm gonna come to provider support, and I'm gonna go to WCCA and the community and tribes to figure out the how we want to do this. But I would like to specialize into kind of a compliance unit. And I struggle with the words. I don't know exactly what we're gonna call this if we get this, but this did come from a lot of the members, because of the lack of efficiency we have with investigations, both in kind of CPS and our licensed complaints. It's very cumbersome. It's licensures kind of have to drop everything and go to that intake, and it's just it's not as efficient. It's not streamlined as well as that I would like. For investigations, we want to try to get them done quickly and try to resolve them quickly. Most of them do not result in a valid finding, and so we just want to get them done quickly and be done, right, and kind of move forward. So that is my ask for the decision package for the 2025 ledge is, again, more FTEs, specialize a compliance unit, and hoping to kind of take that off of the licensors' plate so they can offer better quality technical assistance. Next slide, please. And really, this is, again, kind of why we think this will work. Streamline the process, streamline workload and systems, and create consistent practice, and then also improve that provider experience. The other thing I want to know is, like, how are we going to measure this if this works, right? And so as we just did 5,400 in-person monitoring visits last year, right? And so we need to continue that. We need to continue doing in-person monitoring visits. We also feel that we want to decrease the number of complaints coming in. We have a lot of complaints coming in, and we think that we could provide better technical assistance that they will decrease, and again, more timely complaint completion. We also, as you may all know, that we are developing a survey, kind of a satisfaction survey, how we, feedback. So try to build this in Walk Compass. So when we do a monitoring visits, opportunity to kind of hear how we did, right? And how we can improve in that area. Again, a lot of you heard me say this before. Our goal is to strengthen our relationship with our child care providers, and we have a ways to go, right? And so I feel like getting additional FTEs, specialize in this work, and really taking off the licensor's plate will actually help that experience for the providers. Kathy, I don't know. Your check only shows 4,500 providers. I'm not sure. Let me look into that. Because I just checked yesterday and we're about 5,870. Any questions? I get my numbers from Walk Compass. Enrique?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious, when you were talking, what factors do you feel are leading to the increase in CPS and non-CPS investigations in childcare facilities?
Oh, Enrique, that is a great question. And I don't know, other than kind of climbing out of the pandemic. We just had more people fall into the CPS intake line, actually, and that's, across the board, even in child welfare and other programs that we provide. So number of calls coming in, Enrique, has definitely increased the last 2 years as we kind of came out of the pandemic is probably one of the reasons. Yeah, Gary, like I said, if I'm able to get these FTEs kind of specialize that work and, and come in, reduce that caseload, I'm trying to get down to that 55 or 60. I think 75, 80 is too high.
I was referring to the child abuse and neglect complaints. I think that
Oh.
there's a lot of high turnover in the industry right now and difficulty bringing people on board. And so where you might have had or required 2 staff in a room, but you could typically have 3 in there because you had enough staff and you could do that. Well, now you don't have that 3rd person. So people are stressed. They're skipping breaks. They're leaving the field. New people get hired in who don't have experience. So I'm guessing that all might lead to your higher CPS reports.
And can I throw
Yeah,
something
good point,
in here
Gary.
off of that, please? I think a huge factor is that often providers are told to call into intake, even when it's something that we do not believe is really child abuse or neglect. And we are told by our licensors to call intake on a lot of situations that 5 years ago, we wouldn't have even considered making the phone call because there's no abuse, but that creates a whole another bag of worms going down and doing an investigation because a child scraped their knee.
Yeah. Kathy, good point. And you actually, it's not about just having bodies, guys. Okay, it's not about just adding FTEs to do good quality work, right? And so if we're not able to get these FTEs, we're still are, going to move forward and strengthen our relationship with the childcare providers. And Kathy, it's something that we are looking at also changing some of our processes, right? Whether it's the ELAC or our own kind of rules. It's not just about adding more people. I mean, I think it's going to help, right? But I also think if we don't get these FTEs, we're still going to continue to try to improve in that area. Angie, how are you? Good morning.
I am fine. Good morning to you. I just want to follow up on it. And I've typically had a good relationship with CPS investigations because I understand their role, I understand our role. But recently, when I've been speaking to a couple of other providers, we shared some of the letters that came back that said, due to a lack of this or due to a inconclusive or whatever. But some people's letters are more descriptive than others. And I'm hoping that that's not a racial component, that some centers are giving one that's saying inconclusive, so it's not a finding. And others are saying, oh, it's not a finding because we didn't see this A, B, or C. So mine have always typically been that inconclusive, but I'm seeing other providers that are not of color having more descriptive reasons for saying why theirs are descriptively not a finding. And I would have never known that had I not spoken to another provider. And I think that needs to be an area that we look at. Those should be standardized. And it should not appear that it's weighted one way or the other. So that's just something I want to bring up. As we're, getting into this, we don't want people to feel like they're being singled out or picked on or not fairly saying it's not an issue when it's not an issue. So I just want to throw that out there. Thanks.
Yeah, Angie, will you send me an example of that? Because they are supposed to be standardized, the language for CPS
I sure
findings.
will.
And we do not use inconclusive. It's either found or unfounded. And if we do use kind of inconclusive, it's going to be unfounded. So send me that.
Well, I think they use both. Inconclusive, so it is unfounded, which doesn't make any sense, So yeah,
Right.
but I will definitely send those.
Send me that example. Let me follow up with you on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Debbie, I do not have that that information. Sorry. I could tell you CPS, which is about a 4% founded rate in child cares and 96% unfounded, but I'm not sure of the license complaints of the non-CPS. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ruben. And does anybody else have any questions or comments to wrap that up? All right, then I'm going to kick it over to Marlene so she can introduce our next activity. If she's on here, there she is.
Do we want to take a break before we go and do the activity? We're going to have a full hour and I see we are ahead of schedule. I see some nods. Breaks are always good before we go into an activity. So let's take a 10-minute break. Is that too long? 10-minute break? We'll be back at 10:12 and I'll introduce the activity and we'll go into it. All right, everyone. Hopefully you had a good little break. And I'm gonna give it like a second because sometimes people are off running, doing something in the background. But yeah, so for this next portion, we are going to do an activity, and it's going to be focused on recommendations for this FSKA report for 2024. So now members have a better idea on the status of the previous report recommendations from 2023. That was the PDF document with the high-level recommendations that was sent prior to the meeting, and I believe it was also shared in the chat earlier this morning. And now you've also received an update from Nicole and Ruben on the decision package concepts, and hopefully those two pieces will give you a good idea on recommendations for this year's report. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go into breakout rooms, and together in your groups, we're going to go on each group will use a Jamboard to jot down their, sorry if you hear a phone in the background, but they're going to jot your recommendations for 2024. So I'm not sure if we should do maybe 5 rooms, maybe 7 per room. Is that a good number?
Yeah, we have 3 rooms, groups of 8, 7, and 7, and then I just need to know how long.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm thinking we put people in rooms, and I'm thinking probably like 45 minutes in each breakout room. We'll just work through each of the sections and spend around 7 to 10 minutes per section. So what we did is in the Jamboard link that Jessica just put in the chat, we've taken those 5 high level titles for the original report. So expanding and supporting and strengthening childcare, provider recruitment. So there's 6 slides, no, 5 slides with the titles. And then the last slide is just a parking lot for any additional questions or thoughts or ideas that may not fit into those categories. So what we'll do is we'll do breakout rooms, and within your group, you'll just go through the slides and jot your comments or priorities. Yeah, just like Jessica's showing us in the slide. And hopefully you can spend 7 to 10 minutes per slide. And I do want to remind everybody that our next report development session will be July 9th. So don't feel hurried, or if you didn't get your thoughts down, I'm sure we'll leave this Jamboard open, but we will have another opportunity to come back and do additional work on the report development. Does anyone have any questions?
We're just giving overall arching themes to this topic.
Yeah, so what we've done is taken the 5 main topics from the last report. They're very overarching. And this is where you're going to go into your groups and discuss your priorities for 2024 based on the presentation we just watched on the legislative priorities and the PDF document that was sent out, which is the FSK status tracker, where the 2023 recommendations are at. A lot of the work was already implemented. It's been in implementation by DCYF. So that PDF document provided some specific recommendations from DCYF and significant updates to those areas from the 2023 report. So with those two bodies of work that we just learned about, you should have a pretty good idea on your 2024 priorities. And I think amongst your groups, you'll be able to discuss that and just have ideas on what you want to focus on for 2024. And like I said, we will have another report development meeting in July. So we'll come back to this, probably review what was jotted for this session and keep adding to this. It was also brought up alignment to the early learning coordination plan. So if you do have that plan, or if you're aware of that work, I mean, I'm just putting in the chat, you can download the plan. They have their 5 topic areas, I believe. So you can go into your groups and bring those up as well if that's what you want to focus on. But yeah, this is just an open-ended feedback session where you're going to go into your groups and just discuss your priorities for 2024 based on all the information that we have just brought up or discussed and have sent recently. Yeah, so I'm thinking like 7 people per room, and then you'll just spend around 7 to 10 minutes per slide. Hopefully you can have a timekeeper in your room. Sometimes people like to take notes on behalf of everybody in the room. I'm gonna leave it open however you want. It is pretty easy to just, if you have ideas, just to grab a sticky note and put your idea on the sticky note. And everyone has access to the Jamboard. Deanne, do you have a question?
Yeah, we have talked at various points in time around strategy around the report and thinking about how do we make it more effective and not a laundry list. So my question, I think, is this the brainstorming time of putting everything up, and we're going to think about strategy separately and how to cull things into what our key messages are? That's one question. And then my second question is, since, we could throw our support around the DPs and things that we heard about, and then go a direction around here's what's really going on right now in the field that I think you need to pay attention to, so that we don't end up spending our report on maybe just validating what others have said, but rather say, we agree that these things are important, and here are 3 other things that we want you to really think about. I'm just trying to understand where we are in that process around it, because we had quite a robust conversation around wanting to think about how we structure the report in maybe a new and fresh way that may not be looking like what we did in the past. So this is the brainstorming part, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Right now we're brainstorming from everything you've heard, everything you've received from 2023 and where that work is at. And we're just jotting ideas down. This is really the members coming together to jot their priorities for 2024. So you've heard from DCYF, and if something that is top priority for you that maybe was not brought up by DCYF, or on the PDF document for last year's priorities, this is a chance to come together and discuss those items and jot them here. And we've also had internal conversations around aligning the report development to how I might be saying this wrong because I come from an early learning program, so these are terms I'm new. These terms are new to me, but aligning the report development with the legislature timeframe, so it all aligns together. But we are still strategizing on what that will look like internally, and we will most likely have a better update at the next meeting, and probably from someone who can explain it better. But yes, we are having those discussions internally.
And Deanne, I just wanted to add on to that a little bit. What you described is accurate as far as what we were picturing for this meeting. What we're hoping is just to start getting some of that content down And then that gives us something to work with so we can start putting something together, and then you guys can provide feedback on the structure and the organization of the doc in our next session. So if there's different things you want to add or different categories, we can review that and make those changes in July. And Senator Wilson, did you have your hand up? Did I see that?
Yeah, I wondered whether this was also then a legislative nexus. So this document potentially, when Deanne, you're talking about DPs and those things and other things, you know, whether those other things, is this document all at a legislative nexus level, or is this document at a legislative nexus and other things that may fall within the guise of operations, if you will, or within an agency? Because those are two. One is around rules and one is around procedures, and then the other is around statute and legislation. And is there a difference between those two in this report? And Deanna, you're shaking your head. So, because I mean, for me, that's really important. And as someone providing input, which I'm not doing, I'm just going to listen. It's important to me too that people know they're providing input on things that actually the document will allow someone to take action on, if that makes any sense at all. I see Nicole on there too, and you, Aaron, too. Just clarity, and you know, just for me too, because that's the Venn diagram for me. It's like, what nexus are we kind of looking at, and it can be more than one.
So the stated scope of the report is that it's DCYF and ELAC collectively making recommendations to the legislature. So I think that we should do our best to stay within those lanes. I know that last year it did come up that there were some things that were slightly out of scope, but because they provided important context and they felt it was important to get down on paper, they went ahead and added. So I don't think we need to be too restrictive there, but overall that's where the recommendations should be targeted to.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So I think unless anybody else has any questions, Marlene will break us out, I think.
Yes, let's do it. All right, everybody, welcome back. And I see some really good comments and feedback on the Jamboards. I also see that some of the last couple slides didn't get as many comments and feedback as we would like, and I'm curious just to hear from everyone if you want to spend a couple more minutes just adding more feedback and comments to communications and engagement and funding and grant opportunities. And in language access, it looks like there are some great comments in there. And I'm curious if maybe the time was cut short for your teams as you move through the slides.
Marlene, I think part of it too is just going, well, not just going through the slides, but maybe having, as you send it out to the rest of ELAC, and I'm sorry, my little ones are screaming in the background. If you had more of an explanation as to what exactly each category is for underneath them, that might be helpful as you send it out, or maybe even an excerpt from that part of the report would be helpful as well. So, because it, you know, it took a little bit. We put in some really good ideas, but I think that would be helpful for those who aren't in attendance today.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And then for everybody here right now, I'm going to just put in the chat the 2023 report. So you can also have that link and kind of see those 5 overarching headers and the 2023 recommendations if you want to refer back to that as well when you go back into your group. So we still have 45 minutes left of the meeting. So I'm wondering if we spend around maybe 20 minutes left. Would 20 minutes be enough to go back and do the last couple slides? I don't hear any no's. And I'm curious, do you want to switch it up or stay in the same rooms? Sometimes switching it up can bring about different points of views or ideas, and I'm almost thinking we switch it up.
Where do we start then? In our
That's a
group?
good question. I'm thinking, well, I would love if someone started in the last slide. And then how about everyone starts in the last slide and moves backwards? So slide, what is it? 5? Slide 5. And then 4. And then and then 3, language access. Because it looks like a lot of people left off in language access and then came back into this big main room. How does that sound? All right, I'm not getting any no's and I'm seeing some head shakes. So yeah, let's open up the rooms. And Jessica, I don't know if you can help me like move people around. The 3 rooms were great. It was around 5 people per room. That seemed to 5 to 7 people per room. I know some people had to drop off. And then everyone will go into your room and start out on slide number 5 and work backwards and spend around 5 to 7 minutes per slide, and that should be around 20 minutes. Does that sound good? 20 minutes? Yeah, I think the breakout rooms will pop up again and you should get something and you can join your new room. Is everybody? Okay, everyone should be back from the room. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for going back and filling up those last slides. That's very helpful. And there were some good comments in there, and I saw in the communications and engagement slide several comments around bringing back community forums, and we do have an update on that. And I'm not sure if Ruben wants to provide an update or I can. Well, oh, I see you're back. Oh, Ruben, there's a couple comments on the communications and engagement slide to bring back the forums. And I was wondering if you were wanting to provide an update on that since we do have some scheduled.
Absolutely, love to. So, and this came out of, you guys remember the TLS recommendation. So happy that we have nailed down some dates and some locations. So we have our first community forum, in-person community forum in Wenatchee. I think it's June 11th at 6. And then we have 5 more scheduled throughout the year. So, and we also have one that we're going to schedule in December, just kind of a virtual one for the entire state in case some of those regions weren't able to attend the in-persons. And we're going to continue this, in 2025 too. We think it's important, as you guys know, to have kind of meet in person with our local area administrators too, and our supervisors. We also realize that there can be some differences in regions and also the communities that we serve, right? And so we want to hear from our local leadership team and along with early learning. So this is a commitment not only from licensing, but from early learning, having both of us there and just having some great conversation. And so, like I said, excited that first one will be next month in Wenatchee.
Yeah, so as we finalize those communications, we will share them with the group. So stay tuned for that. But Katie did put in the chat the information for the first one. And then I also have the virtual meeting registration link for December. So if that's something you want to share now, feel free. But like I said, this will all come out soon. And then, so next steps, and yes, so our next meeting for June 4th, which is just like a regularly scheduled ELAC meeting, has been canceled. So our next meeting will be focused on report development. It will be July 9th. And what we're going to do is take all of these comments and start structuring them in a much more strategic way. This is a yearly report, so we're going to look at, well, we're just going to start looking at this information and start structuring it in a way that makes sense for this year's report, and work alongside licensing and the early learning division to strategize how to best get this information out the door. Does anyone have any questions or anything you'd like to see for the next report development meeting in July? And the reason why the June 4th meeting is canceled is because all of the presenters, a lot of the early learning and licensing leadership have a required meeting held by Secretary Ross Hunter. So a lot of the presenters are not, I think it's most of the presenters are not going to be able to meet for the regularly scheduled June 4th meeting, and that's why it was canceled. We're gonna keep this link open, so if you want to go back, if you're at any early learning meetings, or if you think of anything, if you happen to be reading the early learning coordination plan and think of something, we're gonna keep this Jamboard link open, and I'm just putting it in the chat. We are gonna follow up with these meeting details as well. So if you do think of something, just go back in there and jot it on there. And we will regroup July 9th. Does anyone have any last minute comments or thoughts or questions?
Marlene, just want to thank you and the team and thank everyone for coming today and participating. I'm going to see, I don't know if Enrica's still on or not. I can't see the participants, so if she has anything to add.
I think she might be gone. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll get 15 minutes back of our time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.